Good afternoon, class. My name is Jacob Walters. Today I'm going to be talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment guarantees certain freedoms concerning religion, expression, assembly, and the right to petition the government. The First Amendment is a part of a greater document called the Bill of Rights, which was established to protect the civil liberties of all American citizens. The Bill of Rights was originally not included in the Constitution because James Madison felt that if we codified certain rights and protected only certain rights, then all of the other liberties and rights that we feel that we have as Americans would be open for the government to censor. When the Constitution finally went before the states for ratification, however, the anti-federalist movement was strong enough that they were able to petition to have some type of verbiage included in the Constitution that would protect our civil liberties. And that is ultimately where the Bill of Rights came from. So I'm going to focus today's discussion by looking at two specific cases concerning the First Amendment and the Supreme Court, specifically in relation to our freedoms concerning religion. So the first case is called Lee versus Wiseman, and it took place in 1992. And it's the famous case where we typically tend to look at and say this is when prayer was taken out of schools. So during high school and middle school graduations in Providence, Rhode Island, it was customary to invite a member of the clergy to open that particular ceremony in prayer. So in this case, the plaintiff Lee felt that that was unconstitutional and that it was in violation of the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment. And so ultimately it went before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that it was indeed that inviting clergy to speak at public school graduations was indeed in violation of the Establishment Clause. Some of the reasoning that they gave is that when we conduct prayers in public, we often ask people to stand or suggest a moment of silence. Maybe people bow their heads or fold their hands or do other things physically to put themselves into a position of prayer. And what the court decided was that if you ask a high school student or any other normal person to participate in that type of ceremony, they could reasonably view that as a consent or agreement with that ceremony. So in other words, if I ask a high school student to stand up, bow his head, and be silent while I pray, he's going to feel like he's involved and taking part in that ceremony. And that is a violation of the Establishment Clause according to the Supreme Court. The other case is one called Van Orden versus Perry. And this concerned the placement of a monument near the Texas State Capitol with the Ten Commandments inscribed on it. This monument was presented to the state by a civic organization called the Eagles. The plaintiff, Thomas Van Orden, sued for the removal of this monument, claiming that it violated the First Amendment and the Establishment Clause. The Supreme Court ultimately found that the state had a valid secular purpose in recognizing the Eagles Club for their efforts to reduce juvenile delinquency in the state, and also that a reasonable observer who is mindful of history and context would not view this monument as a state endorsement of religion. So here we have two examples of the First Amendment at work. I think that the fact that we see our system, our Supreme Court, making these kinds of decisions, and also that there does not seem to be a wooden or completely partisan tendency in how they interpret these types of cases, should be encouraging to us. It is my belief that our Supreme Court does try to make decisions that are reasonable and also in the interest of freedom and liberty. It also doesn't always get these decisions right. Sometimes they make bad decisions. But it is better than what many people in many other parts of the world have to contend with. So I hope that this illustration kind of made the point that even though we don't necessarily always like how things turn out in our government, that our Constitution still does work, and that our system, while it doesn't always work in our favor, it probably always works in somebody's favor in our country. And so I look forward to listening to your posts and seeing what you all have to say this week. Thank you.